Pandora's box is about to open wide.
Welcome once again to Pandora's Box, ladies and gentlemen. Today we've got a very special guest, Damh the Bard. Damh, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Been a fan of yours for a very, very long time. Been to several of your gigs. I remember actually, I bought your album, The Cauldron Born, which is that track we played into today, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, is the track The Cauldron Born off the album of the same name. I think that's one of your. Would you say that's sort of like your big anthem?
Oh, it really is. I didn't know it at the time when I was writing it. That album changed everything for me, to be honest with you. 2008, that album came out, and I think that was when I kind of became a professional musician after that album. And I think the difference from that one and the ones before are they're very hooked onto mythology, and stuff like that. But The Cauldron Born was, well, there's a reason why it's got a black cover. It was an album that had a number of things that I had to get off my skin, to get out into the public. And a lot of the songs were very, very personal. And I think when you write that kind of song, that it touches other people. They can feel that, and if they're feeling the same, the Cauldron Born is all about the community and about feeling alone and about wondering if you're crazy for talking to trees, and then suddenly you find out you are crazy talking to trees. But there are a lot of other crazy people out there talking to trees as well.
Yeah,
sure.
So
It
definitely feels like a song of like unity and a song of expression. I remember speaking to you after one of your gigs once in Glastonbury as well. I was talking to you about that song, and I remember you were sort of like laughing with me and my friend Drew as well, who's also here today. We were both at the gig.
Right.
We were there with another of our friends called Nikki C. Shout out Nikki C. And we were on the mead and the ale that night, and you played Cauldron Born last, and I remember we sort of came to the front and we were like headbanging, and I think some of the other people there thought we were a bit odd, but we were just so in the moment, and we were absolutely loving it. But I remember talking to you after the gig, and you were saying that you used to be like a rocker and a metaler as well. I think you said that you used to be in a metal band in the 80s or something, which
I did.
Yeah, which
that's amazing.
I definitely like to talk to you more about that later on, but I remember you were saying that like to you it's sort of all the same, but there's something about that song which almost gives me that rock and that metal vibes of. I think partly it's interesting you saying that you poured sort of a lot of emotion into the album, because I think the reason why a lot of hard rock and metal albums resonate with people, especially younger people, is because you're feeling angsty. You feel that these people are pouring their angst and their emotion into these songs, and then it's an outlet for yourself, isn't it? And I think I can very much feel that in The Cauldron Born. I think that's why I naturally almost want to headbang to it. And I think some people might think, well, it's not necessarily like heavy per se, but to me it almost is. It's heavy. It's just not. It's just played on an acoustic, with more of traditional folk instruments rather than through like massive distortion and big cabs and stuff. But.
Yeah. We'll give it time. I might do a metal version of it. You never know.
It's really funny. It's really funny because I've toyed with the idea of doing like a metal cover of it myself, like seeing if some of my friends wanted to do that with me, just because it would be so seamless. It would, it'd be.
You can almost imagine it, can't you?
Yeah, it would be so easy to do. Like like some folk songs, you really have to play around with it to do like a metal version or something. But yeah, that'd be awesome if you did do a metal version of it.
I think the other thing is that metal lyrics are often, they express the things that you feel but can't necessarily say yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing that comes out with this song. It's like I know a lot of people feel that loneliness and that kind of, that need for community. And then this song comes out and said, that's it, that's me, me, and I think,
just sort of give people a little background of sort of how I found out about you and got into you myself, and then if it's all right after that, Damh, I sort of usually try and do this with all of our guests because I think it's sort of like easy, and it's an easy way of sort of keeping track of what's going on, and a good way for people that either are already fans of you and also people that have never heard of you before to find out about you. I'll ask you almost about your life in chronological order, right from the moment you were born, if that's okay.
Sure.
Yeah, great. But I remember how I sort of first really got into you. I think I was 18 or 19, so I'm 33 now, just for context. And I was in a shop on the high street in Glastonbury. I've always been like a massive music fan, and I've always been a folk fan. But I grew up watching. Do you remember that show called Robin of Sherwood? Damh, did you watch that at all?
Huge influence. Yeah. Huge influence on me.
Honestly, I mean, my parents watched that from my earliest memories, so to me that was so hugely influential to me. I literally have like ingrained images of like Herne the Hunter as he's portrayed in Robin of Sherwood, and all of that fantastic music by Clannad that was written for the show. Beautiful, fantastic folk music written for that show. That was a big inspiration to me, so I sort of grew up with that. And then, you know, when I was in my sort of teenage years, got more into like the rock and the metal stuff, so I was listening to a lot of that. But yeah, I remember when I was 19, I was in a shop in Glastonbury and I bought the Cauldron Born. I just saw the album, thought, oh, that looks cool. I liked the name of the tracks on the back, and I didn't know anything else. I just liked the name of the tracks, sort of like Tomb of the King, Cauldron Born. You know, it sort of just sounded cool. And then I really, really got into that. I took it home and really got into it. And then my mum's always been a massive music fan. I was looking through her music collection. I found that she had Herne's Apprentice on CD.
Oh wow!
And I didn't know she had it. She's quite like a quiet and private person, my mum, but she's one of those people that has like thousands of CDs. And I was like, oh, this is great. So I sort of like, you know, took it up to my room and stuff, and I got really into that. And I actually think that's probably my favourite album of yours for whatever reason. But yeah, that was how I really got into you. 14, 15 years ago now, and I've been a big fan since.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah,
that'll be the Goddess and the Green Man in Glastonbury High Street, probably.
I think it was. Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, it's a great shop as well. If anybody's looking to buy anybody some Christmas presents. So talking about sort of your life story, Damh, I've sort of looked you up several times in my life, like little bits of information. Am I right in thinking that is it the Pendragon of the Order of Bards and Druids?
Yes.
That's got to be like the coolest title in all the lands, really, isn't it? I mean,
I don't wear it as a badge, but it is pretty. It's very cool. I am the Pendragon of the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids. Yes.
But let's sort of take it right back to the start, and then we can find out how you ended up as the Pendragon of the Order of Bards and Druids. So, where were you born? What was your life like growing up?
So I was born in Cornwall, in Redruth. I lived in Falmouth. And then a little village called Deveron, which is between Falmouth and Truro on the River Fal. It had a post office, a corner shop, a school, and a pub. And we owned the corner shop. My mum and dad and my uncle and aunt owned the corner shop. And all of my family are they were from south or east of England, but they moved down to Cornwall, had me and my cousins. Stayed there for a few years, and then when I was 5, moved back to Sussex, to Haywards Heath. And I was always into music. Music was my first love. I was on my rocking horse, blaring out, singing my heart out to the Sweet and Slade and T-Rex and all of those bands, back in the 70s. My idol was Brian Connolly, the lead singer of the Sweet. I always wanted to be Brian Connolly. He had blonde hair with me as well. Always wanted to grow my hair long, was into rock music from the moment I could breathe. And I just loved music. It was my first love. And when I was at school, most of my friends were into football. They'd be out in the playground. They'd be doing do you remember the Merlin football cards and all those kinds of things?
I've heard of them, yeah.
Yeah, they just had, it was just swaps, got, haven't got, swapping all these cards. I couldn't give a damn about football, not at all. I couldn't give a damn about that kind of thing. I was totally into music, and I really wanted to learn the bass guitar.
Okay.
And I told that to my mum and dad when I was 7, I guess. And my dad, in one of those things that, dads do, and I'm never quite sure why or how he got this wisdom to say these words, but he said, no, don't play the bass. Learn to play the 6-string, because if you learn the 6-string guitar, you'll never be without an income and you'll never be without friends. And he said, and I have a sneaky feeling that if you can learn how to play the 6-string, you'll be able to play the bass, get by, So I thought, okay, so they bought me an acoustic guitar for my 8th birthday, and they found me a guitar teacher called Timothy O'Leary. Quite freshly over from Ireland in the 70s. You can imagine what kind of life he had. As an Irishman. Yeah, as an Irishman in the UK at that time. But he was a folk musician, and he could play the fiddle, he could play the guitar, he could play banjo, he could play the mandolin. And at one point he decided to make his own Celtic harp, and he couldn't read music. So he sat me down and he would say, I apologise for any of your Irish listeners, but he said, David, have you got your book? Like that. And I would give him this notebook, and he would draw the shapes of chords, and he would play, say, a G chord, and he would say, sing that note. Right, now I'm going to play a C chord. Sing that note. Is that lower or higher? What's the relationship, you think, between those two chords? I'm going to play a D chord. And he basically tuned my ear.
Wow.
And he taught me how to play the guitar completely by ear. I still cannot read a note of music to this day.
Wow. What an amazing way to learn.
Yeah, I was going to say very unconventional, but me and Drew have talked about this in the past. I think sometimes some of the best musicians are the ones that have not been taught in a conventional and traditional manner, because that sort of, although that's great, you're sort of in the confines of that then. When me and Drew were talking about there's a great metal band I'm sure you know of, Damh from Sweden, called Opeth. Like they're not classically taught or traditionally taught either, and they do a lot of interesting, almost odd things. But it's one of the things that makes them sound great. And I think it's often you hear that with musicians like yourself and with Opeth, you hear about they haven't been taught in that traditional way, and it's almost like breaking yourself free of those restraints. Because music shouldn't be something with the restraints. But I think sometimes if you are brought up in almost like that rigid way of like, this is the way that you learn music, right? And there's no other way, then unfortunately you are, you're almost like, without realizing it, you're almost like chaining yourself up a bit, aren't you?
The rules, these are the rules.
Rules and regulations.
And I didn't realize at the time, but years later I realized that Tim had taught me in a very bardic manner. He taught me by an oral tradition. There was nothing written down. There was no rules and regulations.
As of course it would have been for the majority of our history,
exactly.
in the UK. I think one of the things that I find beautiful about folk music, and I'm sure you do too, Damh, is a lot of the folk tunes that folk artists play are hundreds and hundreds of years old, and nobody often, a lot of the times you don't know who originally wrote the tunes. They were passed down from bard to bard, or maybe there'll be some newspaper article from Plymouth from like the 1700s or something with just some lyrics in, and if you're lucky, maybe some chords. I remember I watched a really good Fairport Convention documentary, and they were saying, what was it? They went to like the Library of Folk Music or something back in the 60s, and I think somewhere like Salisbury or something like that, and they would just spend weeks there trying to find old folk tunes from from centuries ago to just do covers of that they could record on their album. But that's such a beautiful way of learning, isn't it?
Yeah, and it really opened, and so I could hear a good melody. Do you know what I mean? I heard music all over the place, because of the way Tim taught me, and I broke my music teacher's heart when I didn't take music at school. I chose not to take it as an option, and he said, "But Dave, you're one of 3 people in this school that I know can go on to university to do music. Why aren't you doing it?" And in a typical teenage goth, response, I just said, "I don't want to learn about dead people's music.
Right.
I want to learn a contemporary music. I want to learn what's happening now. I don't want to learn about Mozart and Beethoven." Years later, I can hear the beauty in classical, but right then it was like that was not what I was interested in. Sure. And so I got that. That led to things like when I have been recording albums, I've played a couple of notes together on a couple of songs, and I've given that song to listen to a friend who does know the rules of music, and to me they've sounded fine. And he said and they've said to me, that shouldn't work. Those 2 notes together should not work. How do they work? What have you done to make them work? And so it's been a real useful thing. So Tim taught me folk music. He one of the first songs he taught me was Crazy Man Michael by Fairport Convention, and he was into the Fairports and the Steel Ice bands and the Lindisfarnes, Pentangle, all that stuff. All the hippie folk of the 60s and 70s, and
that great folk revival in the 60s.
Oh, perfect. Man, it was fantastic. And he, Nick Drake, he was also obviously into Planxty and Christy Moore and all those bands as well from Ireland, and he taught me fingerstyle guitar playing, again purely in patterns and stuff like that, not trying to follow notes on a screen or tab or anything. Literally just following him while he was playing. I'd watch his hands move, and I'd kind of predict what chord his hands were going to next, and try and keep up with him and stuff like that. It was a fabulous way of learning an instrument.
Wow.
But of course, then I hit teenage years, and I wanted to be in a rock band. I didn't want to be in a folk band.
Yeah.
I wanted to be in a rock band. But because of the way Tim had taught me, whenever I got myself a lovely white Fender Stratocaster, and I plugged it in, and I couldn't play it for the sake of me. I couldn't get my head around. No, the lead guitar stuff, and I could do the kind of rhythm guitar, but I wasn't really interested in that. I wanted to be the man at the front, you know.
Sure.
Doing all that
doing
sort
the flashy
of stuff.
Yeah,
but I couldn't pull it off, and there were other guitar players far better at electric rock guitar.
When
at
you
school.
say you couldn't pull it off, because I mean, obviously I've seen and heard a lot of your music. Obviously, you are technically proficient. What is it about the lead that you don't think that you can get on board with? Because I think often, and I think people that don't play the guitar themselves don't realise this, but often rhythm, especially in folk music and that American country music, folk music style as well, can be actually a lot more complicated than just playing a solo. So what do you think it is about that?
Well, I don't believe you.
Oh, really?
I'm joking.
No, sure.
I would like to think that was true, but in my experience, I think it was because I was taught fingerstyle guitar. It was the transformation between that and a pick, playing one note, one string, and then having to work out which string I was picking with that pick. You know,
it just felt odd to you.
And that I was playing. It felt really weird, you know. However, what I found was I had a natural rhythm, probably again because of the way that Tim had taught me. He had instilled a groove in me, you know, a sense
Which
of
is so
groove.
important.
It all starts with the groove.
Yeah, that's it. So I just basically got my mum and dad to buy me a couple of drumsticks, and I bashed the hell out of my pillow for like 6 months playing along with stuff. And then a friend of mine in Southampton. Can you hear me all right? Is it loud enough? Do I need to turn it up
just a little bit down? Is that okay?
Yeah, I will.
Just a little
bit. Yeah. I can see that the thing is a little bit kind of on the quiet side. Let's have a go at that.
Thank you.
He was in a marching band in Southampton, and he had a drum kit in his shed. And they all went out and left the shed open. So I dived in there and was bashing the hell out of this drum kit. And he'd gone out, and all of the adults came back, and they said, "Oh, we didn't know Philip was in." And they opened the door, and it was me. And again, I just knew what to do and and just knew what to do.
I find that very impressive, because I actually find the drum kit, like, depends, obviously. It depends what you're doing. I think like a boom, tss, boom, boom, tss, obviously is like pretty easy, but I think to be like a good drummer naturally, I think is quite a blessing.
It was wonderful, and I felt utterly at home. And so my mum and dad bought me a drum kit, and I joined bands as the drummer for years.
Wow.
And that then led me to Targa, who was my heavy metal band.
So you were. I didn't realise that you were the drummer in Targa.
I was the drummer.
I assumed you were like guitarist or guitar singer, sort of.
I was at the back, but by then my huge influence was Tommy Lee. So, like, you know, he might be a drummer at the back, but man, you watched him.
Yeah.
You know? And so I learned how to twiddle my sticks, you know, and all those things, and bounce sticks off skins and all that stuff. And I had a double bass drum Premier Black Shadow kit.
Nice.
And it was, you know, so I was doing all of the double bass work.
Awesome.
You know, back before Metallica kind of
Really?
came out. And, you know, I was the first time I heard the double bass drum was in Overkill by Motorhead.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And the whole album starts with this double bass drum kit, and I just thought, how the hell has he done that? And found out, got the double bass kits. So Targa did pretty well. You know, they were on the support slots in London. We supported a number of bands, FM, and you know, we were kind of like, if you got Bon Jovi and Anthrax,
Nice mix. And put them in a blender.
shook them up, and then poured them out. That's what we were like. We were like a thrash metal, but with melody.
Sure,
you know. And we had a Japanese female vocalist called Reiko. She was amazing. And we played regularly at what was at the time one of the kind of major stepping stones onto success was the Shepherd's Bush Wellington, it was called the Wellington at Shepherd's Bush. Tiger Tales played there for a while. It was the thing before the Marquee, and then we got our headline slot at the Marquee Club, the old Marquee Club at Wardour Street, and the guitarist left about 2 weeks before that, and the band had gone through so many changes. And that was the thing that killed it for me. And I've had enough. And I decided that if I hadn't have made it by the time I was, whatever it was, 21, I was going to sell my drum kit and buy a Lotus Esprit Turbo.
Nice.
But I didn't, because what happened at about that time is this is I hope you're not bored by it.
No, I'm loving it.
It's amazing.
I'm
really
it.
interesting.
Okay.
I'm like building up a little a questionnaire for like after you said it, because there's loads of things I want to ask you, but I'm enjoying your flow, so I'm going to let you sort of say everything you want to say first, and then I'm going to ask you questions afterwards.
Okay, brilliant. All right, so at the same time as all this heavy rock stuff was coming out, I was getting into the occult. I don't know if you remember Tipper Gore, when she got those labels put onto CDs, saying that the occult the heavy metal will lead you to to the occult. Well, she was absolutely right. I'm a total living proof that she was right. Sure. Black Sabbath, the lyrics of Ronnie James Dio, Rainbow, Led Zeppelin, all those bands that were dabbling in this kind of magical stuff as well as their music, just led me straight down that. And of course then I discovered the works of Uncle Aleister Crowley.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And
I've read a lot of his works.
I joined a magical lodge at the age of 18, and they taught me Hermetic magic, which is the stuff that is linked to the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, a sort of Victorian magical order that really paved the way for a lot of what we do now in modern paganism and magic like that. So that was all going on. I was dressing in complete black. My bedroom was black. My
full goth
carpet was black. But I never fully pulled it off because I was blonde.
Right. Okay.
So I never could.
Never quite made the leap to dye your hair.
No. But you see, goth wasn't what I was after. I was looking at Richie Blackmore, the Man in Black. I was looking at it wasn't a goth thing. It was
I can empathise with that. I'm quite similar. I'm quite similar.
Yeah. And so I was getting into all of that, and that. Then finally, the ceremonial magic lodge kind of split up. They sometimes do. They implode sometimes. And it left me in a kind of spiritual no man's land. So I thought back, and I looked back in my memory, and I remembered Robin of Sherwood.
Oh, wow. That's good, considering I mentioned it earlier, so that's quite interesting.
Exactly. Yeah, I remembered Robin of Sherwood. I remembered Herne the Hunter. And I remembered the feeling I got when I saw that horned image in the mists in the woods. And I thought, maybe I'm a pagan. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe I'm not meant to be a magician. Maybe I'm meant to be a pagan. So I sent off for the Pagan Federation, Guild of Pagans, and one of the other things I sent off for was a little tiny advert in a magazine called Prediction, and it was a little tiny classified ad. And it said, "Are you interested in green spirituality? If you are, you might be interested in the work of the Druids." So I sent off for some information of the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids, and in my mind I just thought, and looking at my face in the screen here, I've finally achieved this archetype. But I just thought, Druids, old men with white beards and long hair,
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But and Stonehenge, and I thought, well, okay, we'll send it off. And when it arrived, it mentioned the path of the Bard, that there is a sacred tradition from these islands, and not just these islands, but Western Europe, and Northern Europe, of this sacred poet, of this walking storyteller and newspaper of the day that could traverse through words and music this veil between the other world and this world and all that kind of stuff.
I think it's hard for people to appreciate nowadays. Like, we have obviously so much media and everything, and we can all read and write for the most part nowadays. But back in the day, a hell of a lot of people were illiterate. There was no media for people to sort of read, or like most people didn't read newspapers and stuff like that. Whether it was like morals or traditions or stories, they were all passed down through the bards. So the role of the bard historically was massively important.
Hugely important. And also imagine that the only time that you could hear music is when a human being who could play an instrument turned up at your
presence,
village. You couldn't turn on the radio. You couldn't listen to Spotify. You couldn't put on a CD or vinyl or any of the other things we've had. That's the only time it was available.
So they would have been valued massively. Every bard would have been valued.
Oh, absolutely. And I read that and I thought, this could be it. So I sent off and got this information back, saw the tradition of the bard, and just joined OBOD in April 94.
Joined what, sorry?
The Order of OBOD,
yeah.
the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids, April 94. I sent off for their intro pack for their course in April 94 and then joined in September. And really that was it for me. I found my home. If the Cauldron Born was out then, that's what I was feeling when I found the Order, and Druidry. And really that's how I got to that point. Of joining the Order. I did their courses. They do 3 grade courses, a Bard, Ovate and Druid courses, and I went to my first Druid camp in, I think it was July 95, and I went on my own. I took my guitar. That was the only instrument I had. The only thing I could play at the time was either a bit of Metallica or some Christy Moore and some of these old folk songs that I could hear. I hadn't played the guitar for years, because I'd been a drummer.
Did you not?
I gave it up.
Did you not really feel like you could remember much from your childhood?
Not really.
With your original guitar teacher.
I gave up the guitar when I became a drummer, and I didn't touch it. I literally didn't touch it for years. It was the same guitar I had as the one my mum and dad had bought me.
So you still had it in the background, lingering around. You just didn't touch it. It was just a piece of furniture.
Yeah, absolutely incredible, really.
Yeah.
And I went to my tent and I sat there, and then I saw this man walk into the centre of a circle that we'd set up with arches of flowers and stuff, and he just started to play the Northumbrian bagpipes. And then out of all of these tents, these white-robed figures started to walk towards the central circle. I didn't have a robe or anything like that, and I remember thinking, "Oh my God, they're real." They're real. There really are druids in this world. And I joined this circle, and I just was lost in the magic of this circle. A woman called Emma Restalor, she was an OBOD tutor at the time, went on to be a very, very famous druid in her own right and writer. She was cast the circle with bells, little bells, and as she walked past me, I felt the air crackle with some kind of magical energy, And then that night, a young woman called Ziggy joined our campfire and said, do you mind if I play some harp by your fire? And she just got a little lap harp out and started to play this Celtic harp by the fire. And I just laid back, I looked at the stars, I heard the crackle of fire, I smelt the wood smoke and heard the voices of conversation from around the field, listening to this Celtic harp being played and sung to, and I thought, this is it. And I knew then what I had to do. So when I got home, I sold my drum kit and bought a Celtic harp instead of a Lotus Esprit Turbo. Slightly different.
Yeah.
And that camp was where things happened as well. 2 weeks before I was choosing my path. I'm coming to the end of that story now. 2 weeks before I was kind of still weighing up Wicca or Druidry, because that seemed to be the choice at the time. The northern tradition wasn't really a thing back in the mid 90s. The Odinic stuff wasn't really around at that time. It wasn't there. Not really. It was, but it was tiny.
It's had a massive revival, hasn't it? Because of a lot of the big shows like Vikings, Last Kingdom.
Absolutely.
You see everywhere you go nowadays, you see Viking-looking fellas. And, I mean, in Glastonbury, there's like several Viking sort of based shops and things like that. Yeah.
Back in the 90s, it just wasn't there, really. And it was Wicca or Druidry, and it was mostly Wicca, if I'm truthful. If you chose Druidry, you were going against the kind of trend at the time. And I went to a Wiccan camp, and it was a 7-day camp, and I wasn't an initiate, so I couldn't go to any of the workshops or anything, but I joined their campfire. And that evening I heard their chants, we all come from the goddess, Lady Spinos, these Wiccan chants around this campfire. And it was wonderful. But by night 4 of the same chants, I was thinking, we really need some songs.
Need some fresh material here.
We do. We need some fresh material. We need to just have a guitar and be able to sing campfire songs about this stuff.
Yeah.
And that was the spark for me. I just thought, well, if they don't exist, I'll write a few.
Yeah.
Nice.
I'll just write a few pagan songs that people can sing around campfires. And if I'm there, I'll be able to sing them around the campfires and get everyone singing. And that was the root of what's led me to here and talking to you.
So that was the start of Damh the Bard as we know him now. Was that moment?
Was that moment,
Wow.
yeah. And what I didn't realise, none of this was on my radar. I didn't set out to become a known musician. I just wanted to write songs for campfires.
Sure.
But what I completely missed was the fact that this was a worldwide movement, and that what people would like to sing around campfires in Britain, they want to sing around campfires in Canada, in Australia, in New Zealand, in Europe,
And unbeknownst to you,
off it went.
Unbeknownst to you, looking at it almost like from a businessman's point of view, you'd found a niche in the market. You weren't looking at it like that, but let's face it, there was like there's not how many musicians are there like yourself, especially in those days. Like you can find obviously nowadays it's much easier to find music because of Spotify and YouTube and stuff like that, but you found a real niche.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, it wasn't a kind of conscious decision. It was what I wanted to hear, and that also has always been my benchmark. If I write a song, it has to be a song that I would want to listen to myself.
Yeah, it's massively important.
And if I was at a campfire or at a gig and somebody played this song, I would think, yeah, I like this song. So
Gives
that's
you integrity
really what
as well.
it was all about.
That's a good benchmark into whether other people will like it as well. I think you've got to love it yourself to be able to know that it's going to resonate with other people. I was going to ask as well, Damh, was that your first like foray into songwriting, like with the guitars when you first thought of that concept and started writing, or had you wrote anything before that?
Yeah, me and one of the guitar players of Targa were the main. I was like a bit of a Neil Peart.
Yeah,
I was a songwriting
Shout out
drummer.
Neil Peart, rest in peace.
Yeah.
Drummer of Rush, for anybody that doesn't know who that is. Rest in peace.
Yeah. I was a bit of a Neil Peart. I was a songwriting drummer.
Oh, nice.
I have to say, I have to say, my benchmarks weren't as high at the time, and I think I wrote a bit of rubbish, probably in Targa.
Yeah.
I really.
But you had the creative impulse to actually create and that's amazing.
Yeah. But it all came, the first song I ever wrote was Tomb of the King, actually.
Really?
I didn't record for many years. Yeah, it was the first song I ever wrote.
It's funny because I mentioned that, and I said that was one of my favourite ones of Cauldron Born just earlier on the show.
Yeah,
Funny enough, I listened to it driving on the way to the studio today. Tomb of the King.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Well, I wrote that after attending a road protest demonstration at Newbury Bypass.
Right.
We held a druid ceremony around an oak tree. We took the person living in the oak tree. I mean, I don't know if you remember these road protests, but people used to live in oak trees, and they live in the trees, and they built walkways between the trees so they didn't have to touch the ground. Yeah. Oh, it's incredible, the dedication to some of these road protesters. Yeah, and there was this guy living on a pallet. Wow. Basically, we went to sleep on a pallet in this tree, and I said to him, if I'd just roll over and die,
sure,
I'd just fall off. But he'd planted an oak tree from one of the acorns from this oak and gave it to the druids and said, if this tree falls, plant this tree. And it was a beautiful ceremony of dedication and protection from this tree. And that inspired that song. And the news is that tree, it escaped the chainsaw. It's actually in the middle of a roundabout.
Really?
Wow. From the Newbury Bypass.
Wow.
Yeah, this one oak, you did escape. I don't know if it was us or it was just meant to be anyway. But, it escaped the chainsaw. But that song inspired Tomb of the King, which when you listen to it is a bit of a protest song.
Yeah, it sort of makes sense now because you mentioned how obviously the world's not that dissimilar to how it was in the past, but what is it you say the traffic jam now has 3 lanes and things.
Exactly, and it does. Yeah. And the Newbury Bypass still has loads of traffic jams.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Fantastic.
Yes.
So
that was really it. Really, that kind of brings me up to that point in life.
Right. So when did you start? I'll tell you. No, I'll ask you some questions before we sort of carry on with your story. So going back to you, saying that you asked for a bass guitar and your father, very wisely said no, but buy a six string. Did you have any musicians in the family? Were either of your parents very musical or anything like that?
Not at all. Nothing.
Not at all.
No.
You don't know of any musicians in your family other than you?
Nope. Not the slightest. My dad loved music.
Yeah.
I mean, he weaned me on Johnny Cash and John Denver and the Rolling Stones and stuff like that. And he loved listening to music. And I think he was a frustrated musician.
Right.
I think he always probably wanted to be a musician, but when he grew up, he didn't have those chances. So when I said I wanted to be, he jumped on it, and my parents could not have been more proud and
it's amazing that you got that support.
Dedicated to me. Yeah.
What about your mum? Was she into music, or was it just your father primarily?
It was mainly my dad. He was the one that kind of controlled the stereo in the car and stuff like that. But apart from that, no really? Other. No.
How do you think that he knew? I mean, as a guitarist, it seems like an obvious thing to do. But how do you think he knew that it was such good advice to get you a guitar rather than a bass? I
asked him that all throughout the time he was alive, and he said, I don't know why I said that.
Really? It was just some intuition on his part.
Divine message.
It was just I don't know. He doesn't know. I don't know. But it was so important that choice.
It's interesting though, isn't it? Because as a musician, like we all know, and we all sort of joke about, like, oh yeah, learn to become a guitarist, and then if it doesn't fall through, at least you become a bassist. Everyone always says that, don't they? If you're a rubbish guitarist, you will be an okay bassist.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is a bit harsh. There are obviously some absolutely insanely good bassists in the world, but it's a nice little joke that's passed around sort of musicians, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Very, very, very wise by your dad. What was it? I was going to ask you some more questions. And this is the problem. I've got such a bad short-term memory.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
To jump in.
Yeah, go ahead, Bullwinkle.
When talking about first going to the campfire and the camps that you were going to, what other things were they teaching there when you first sort of hopped in? Was it just the music element, or was there other spirituality things that you were learning from these sort of lessons that were taking place?
So it was very much the essence, I think, of Druidry it's a set of skills, I guess you'd call them, that enable you to have a closer relationship with the natural world, And when I say the natural world, I include the magical worlds in that as well, because to me they are natural. The weird is just is a wave, just like radio waves and everything else. And I think our lifestyles and the way we live are not conducive or congruent with that way of living. Everything from eating food out of season to just being brought up with the idea that we have dominion over all life on earth, as is said in the Bible, And I think Druidry says, no, you're an animal. Yeah. You're an ape.
Yes, I completely agree. Yeah.
You might be a very intelligent one under our own definitions of what intelligence is, but actually you're just another species on the earth. And this is not just your home; it's everything else, and the everything else on this planet is a person too, And I think that is, to me, what Druidry is all about. It's very animistic, very animistic, and so it teaches. And we are a species of story. I think that's the other thing. We you can tell this by our addiction to Netflix shows and all things like that. We love a good story and. The stories that connect us to the land are some of the things which I think we've forgotten. And again, Druidry reignites that. So that mountain by the town once had a story attached to it, and the story would have said maybe that there was a sleeping giant under the mountain, and its breath was stilled when the wind blew. And it might be that mountain protected the village from storms. And so this story developed to tell the story of the mountain in its relationship with your lives and all things like that.
It's symbolic.
And and then of course once you have that relationship and that mountain has a spirit and it's a protective spirit, when you know that it contains some kind of mineral that you need for your new iPhone battery, it's far harder to blow the mountain up because you have that relationship with it, and I think that the Druids, those people in old, I'm not painting them as saints because they weren't, but they at least had a far more animistic relationship with the land around.
I think that's the thing though. You're saying they're not saints, but going back with what you were saying about us being animals, like animals themselves aren't saints. That's not the point.
No,
nature is very much like life and death. There's always a balance. You see any predator on the planet, it's perfectly willing to absolutely destroy their prey. That might seem savage to some people. I think because our lives are we're so mollycoddled in some ways. Some people find it upsetting to say watch a documentary that shows like a lion eating a zebra or something in Africa. I think it's almost like important though to remember that is a normal part of life. Especially it's very easy for us to live in this very comfortable, confined little way. Where you, turn off the telly when that's going on because that's upsetting. I think no, that's life, but. Going with what you're saying, the point isn't that anybody is sort of like a saint or that Druids are saints. That the point is that you are living in tune with nature. And as I said, nature, and that's one of the things going back to what was very much sort of preached actually in Robin of Sherwood. It's like Robin of Hood and Herne. It wasn't the power of. It wasn't harping on about good all the time. It was the powers of light and darkness. That's how Herne would always say to Robin, wouldn't he? Like you have the powers of light and darkness. Like it's like balance almost. At night time the moon rises. In the day the sun rises. You could not appreciate summer if it wasn't for winter. If you didn't die, how would you appreciate living? So that's what it's all about to me.
Well, there you go. You've summed up Druidry better than I did.
Thanks, man. That's a massive honour coming from you.
But that is true. That's the thing. Nature is red in tooth and claw. It's the beautiful unfurling of the butterfly, and it's the hurricane. It's and everything in between, and we are insulated. I don't want this to become a kind of preachy thing, but we are insulated from death. We are, and we don't know where our food comes from, and we don't see it die. We see it nicely shrunk wrapped on shelves, and I think that part of that is those are the questions a lot of Druids ask themselves as well. How can I do this? To square that circle, I went off on a survival course with Ray Mears Survival School. Brilliant. Because I thought if I'm going to eat meat, I do need to fess up and step up and be able to
hunt it,
to kill something for my food. And in that moment, I kind of thought, I can do this. I don't like it, So I jumped on the vegetarianism instead.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah, no. I think that shows obviously that you have a lot of integrity and that you're very honest with yourself, sort of looking in the mirror. But I do sort of like tend to concur. One of the things I almost find frustrating with modern society, and don't get me wrong, I don't necessarily blame anyone for this because I don't think it was done with bad intentions. I think it was done with the right intentions. But in sort of our progression as a species. Things have been set up for us as to be as convenient as possible. But as you said, in that process, we've become out of touch. We don't know where our food came from. You pick up a packet of mince, off like Sainsbury's shelf or whatever, and you take it home. There's no connection there. Have you sort of like earned it in that way? And what I mean by that is, as you said, you sort of don't feel like you can earn it because you didn't enjoy. You couldn't look yourself in the mirror sort of killing these animals or whatever, so you thought it was a better path for you to become a vegetarian. Well, I do agree that there is a level of hypocrisy that if you, a bit like what I was saying earlier on about people not liking watching a documentary about a lion killing a zebra. Well, if you sort of eat meat yourself, then you're sort of a bit of a hypocrite, aren't you? Because to you, you're seeing it as almost like a chocolate bar. Well, it's not. That's a life.
Yeah, I think that the problem is that people can tend to demand perfection. And that, if you see any crack in somebody's argument that shows there is a certain level of hypocrisy, that instantly destroys their other arguments. And I don't think it's as simple as that. I think the thing is we are so ingrained in modern life that any step you can make, even if it's just recycling your plastic, is a good step. Yeah. I think if you think to yourself, I have to be a vegan, I have to do this, I have to do that, and if I don't do that, then I'm not doing it properly, I think you will paralyse yourself. Yeah. and you won't be able to do anything.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think I think it's just I don't blame anybody for their lifestyles, and I don't judge anybody for their lifestyles. I can only judge myself.
Yeah.
And I think I know that I can't take that final step and be a vegan.
Yeah. Well,
because I found that I just love cheese.
It's so funny. It's so funny because the amount of vegetarians I've spoken to that have literally said just that, like they would be a vegan, but they like cheese too much.
Yeah.
But I think as well. I think. As I said, I don't want to get like too overly sort of like boring listeners with things like this, but I do think there's a difference. Say something like cheese. I mean, often, it can be quite ethical the way that you can say get cheese and that. I know that some probably more angry vegans might disagree with that, but a lot of farmers do very much care for their animals. I'm not saying that all farmers do, but I know some farmers personally, and I live in quite a rural area, and I can assure a lot of people that a lot of decent farmers out there that do care very much for their animals from morning until night, and you can sort of do it in a way that is natural, getting say like dairy products from animals. So it's not. I don't see that necessarily as like brutal or anything like that. I say a lot of shepherds in the world and stuff are giving their animals a far better life than they would have in the wild. Sort of thrown to the wolves, literally. If they were living without sort of under sort of like a human umbrella, so to speak. I don't know what you think about that, but.
Well, I just like I say, I think it's personal choice to me.
Yeah.
But what I will say is that a lot of people are very, very disconnected in a lot of ways, and one of the major things about Druidry and of Wicca as well, and I think also the North tradition, are the seasonal festivals that you celebrate, and so you mark what we call a Wheel of the Year, and this Wheel of the Year is a series certainly in Druidry and Wicca of 8 festivals, solar festivals and agricultural festivals, and you mark those probably about every 6 weeks, and what we do is we go to the same place. We go to the Long Man of Wilmington, we go to a hill there, and we hold a ceremony there, and you look out and you connect with what is happening in the landscape, and even that, in fact not even that is a huge step to bringing yourself back in tune with the cycles of the natural world. Food choices and all of that aside, just literally connecting with the seasons is a massive thing for people to be able to do, and I think that is probably one of the biggest gifts for me of Druidry are those 8 festivals.
Yeah, I think for myself, like one of the things is best for me, both mentally and physically, is I just like love hiking. And where we are in Somerset, we're right next to the Quantock Hills, and also not far from Exmoor at all. 2 like beautiful areas. You can like regularly see stag roaming free and all sorts of other animals. Wild horses and things like that. And one of the things that's I always feel most sort of at peace and happiest is after I've been back from a big hike. But as I said as well, like doing that year round. So you're doing it in the autumn where everything's orange and rusty, and you're doing it in winter when everything's frozen or even like snowy, and through all those seasons, and appreciating all the different things about those seasons. Is just such like a beautiful thing to do. Another thing that I thought was interesting, you saying about obviously like the wheel. Actually, one of my favourite songs of yours is the wheel, and I've actually sort of like covered that like several times at sort of gigs of my own. I just love that. I love the way that you sort of do it in a way that you're talking almost like as a relationship between I guess like you don't describe him as this in the song. I can't remember. Like John, it's almost like John Barleycorn and it's almost like as that couple. It's almost like he'll guard her throne in the afterlife until she's born again. And I think that's such like a beautiful and romantic song. The way you're describing the Wheel of the Year in the seasons, but in this actually like really intimate, romantic way, almost like that we can all relate to, like when you love somebody. And I think that's a beautiful song.
Thank you. That's a nice one to play live as well. Yeah.
Really nice song. Okay, so when did you? So picking up where we left off in terms of like your story. So you became sort of like a bard naturally because you wanted to write songs as like a druid for these meetups and stuff like that. When did you start referring to yourself as Damh the Bard?
Pretty quick, actually. Before I was even I did form a folk band at the end of the 90s, and took it properly then. But I was on. Do you remember email lists before Facebook and all these things? We used to have news groups, and email lists was the way that we, used to communicate on the internet. And I was looking for a bardic name. A lot of people say you have a bardic name, and I was looking for one, and nothing would come. And then I got a set of cards called the Druid Animal Oracle, and I looked through, and there was the stag, and the stag, the deer, ever since that's Robin of Sherwood, Herne experience, have always been my favourite animals.
Resonated with you.
It resonated with something inside. I think dogs are my favourite animals, but still, deer are my favourite kind of wild animal. And I looked at the bottom of the stag card, and it had the word DAMH. And I heard that, and I thought, oh, damn, And then, I've heard yourself saying it too, and I never worry about anything correcting anybody, but it's pronounced it's a Scottish Gaelic word, and it's pronounced Darve.
Oh, Darve. Matt, I've never ever heard anyone refer to you as Damh the Bard.
No. I try and avoid it because it sounds a bit up itself. But basically,
actually, it's Darve.
So the word is pronounced Darve, and it's essentially Gaelic for stag.
Yeah. I have read that it's Gaelic for stag. I did not know that you pronounce it like Darve. No, not. That's very interesting.
Well, my name is David.
Yeah,
my name is
that
Dave.
sort of makes sense as well. Yeah.
And so I literally just started to spell Dave as DAMH.
Right.
Partly to confuse everybody in the entire world who would ever try and work out what my name was. Partly to really cock myself up when it came to creating a website, because if you say my website's Dave the Bard, no one ever find if it was DAMH the Bard. Sure. But it just fit. Yeah. It just fitted, and I was Darve or Dave the Bard on all of these old news groups and email lists well before I became known as a musician. But I kept it as my name, and we formed a band called Spiral Castle in the late 80s. I got a gig supporting the Bard Robin Williamson. He was in the Incredible String Band.
Brilliant
back
band.
in the
That's
60s.
Another band I've listened to a lot that I'm a fan of. Very influential. A lot of people don't know about them nowadays, but they influenced like Led Zeppelin and other like the Beatles and. Yeah,
they played at Woodstock, and Robin Williamson was a Scottish bard. That's what he did after the Incredible String Band. He became a storyteller and a harper.
Wow.
And I saw him once and just fell in love with his stuff. And then I got the opportunity to support him as a support slot, and so I formed Spiral Castle purely for that support slot.
So cool.
And we over one New Year's Eve with the 4 drunken mates saying, "Yeah, I'll be in the band," and it was one of those moments.
Sure.
And we enjoyed it so much we carried on, and we recorded an album called None But Seven, and then basically, as bands do, it was harder and harder to get 4 people in the same room at the same time, and I had kept on writing music. That Spiral Castle was all about essentially writing and recording the music that I was writing. So I got myself a little Fostex 4-track back at the time, one of those tape deck 4 tracks, and I started to put the songs together myself, and thought I probably could do this on my own. I remember seeing Mike Oldfield back on Blue Peter when I was a kid, and he was putting together the Blue Peter theme tune by himself, and like the whole of Tubular Bells is just him.
Yeah, amazing.
And I thought, well, I can drum, I can play the bass, I can play the guitar, I can sing. I can probably do this on my own. I probably don't need a band.
Yeah.
So
you started getting into. Is that so? That's how you got into your production.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that was it. Really.
How naturally did that come to you?
Oh, again, really naturally. It was just I just fell right into it, and Herne's Apprentice was my first solo album.
So well produced as well, considering that was like your first album that you produced yourself.
I listen to it now and I think, well, it's got a sense of age to it. I think but I really wanted to. I knew that I was in this for the long journey, and so I wanted all of my albums to be albums that I could be proud of forever. And that I wouldn't look back and think, oh God, I hate that album. I wish I'd done that differently. And of course, there was no there was no drums on. There was no drum kit on Hearn's Apprentice. It was a djembe, just a hand drum. And then the next album I did was Hillsdale Hollow, and I discovered sampled orchestras, and I got a proper drum kit for that one and everything, and it all changed with that album. But and that was it really. I just thought I could probably do this on my own, and I also realised after 3 albums that I think if you want to be able to earn a living from music, it's very hard with a band.
Right. For what reasons exactly?
Well, you have to you go play your gigs. Exactly, you go play your gigs.
I didn't know if there was anything more to it than that, other than just this purely splitting it.
Not if you want to earn a living from it. Like I say, it's and I do realise now that when it comes to my music, I'm a bit of a control freak as well.
So have you produced all of your albums?
Yes.
And is it very important to you that you do? Would you never even think about getting a producer to record any of it? When you say you're a bit of a control freak, will you be like, no, I'm not comfortable with somebody taking the reins with that?
The only producer that I started to work with for a little while, but he got too busy, was Simon Emerson. He was the founder of Afro-Celt Sound System and the Imagine Village, and he was also a druid in the Order. And he was a record producer along with his friend Youth, who is also a druid. He produced the Verve's Urban Hymns album.
Wow, great album.
And he's the bass player of a band called Killing Joke.
I've heard of them. Yeah, great band.
Okay,
We've played them on
AEW
Radio quite a lot. My old band's actually a really big fan of the band, and I know that James Hetfield from Metallica is a fan of Killing Joke as well. Yeah,
well, Killing Joke, they influenced Nirvana and lots of people. Well, Youth. He's a buddy, and he's an OBOD member, and he turns up at the OBOD events, and nobody really knows who he is there. He just mixes in with the crowd, and he doesn't wear his "I'm a rock star" on my shoulder thing.
He's quite anonymous.
So I think if I could be, I would like to work with Youth maybe, but I also have a very distinct feel of what I want the album and songs to sound like. When I write a song, I'm already imagining what it sounds like as a full produced song.
And if it didn't sound like that, you wouldn't like it.
No, I wouldn't like it.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough.
No, even if it sounded better, I wouldn't like it. I probably would hate it even more.
Do you know what? I actually really appreciate that though. I do really appreciate that though, because I think, as you said, it's like if you have this image in mind and it doesn't come out like that, as you said, even if it is better. I mean, there's obviously the joking way of looking at it. Do you know what I mean? Like, oh, you bugger, made it even better than I thought. But it's sort of, that's sort of besides the point, though, isn't it? It's like you've got this image and you want it to come into fruition like that. Even if it comes out.
And I'm hard enough on myself as it is. I can when I'm writing a song, I can work on a line for months. It has got to be as perfect to my ears as it could be every time. So I don't know that a producer could kick me up the arse any more than I do myself.
I see it a bit like I'm the sort of person I always like to for the most part, I like to make my own drinks, I like to cook my own food, and I see it as even if someone's following the same recipes, those little nuances, those little differences in the things that people were going to do things. And then if it's like your drink or your food isn't quite the way you like it, you know what I mean? It can be quite panicky, I would rather have done it myself. I notice some people, they're not bothered, are they? They think, oh no, it's great, cook for me and make me drinks and stuff like that. It's like, no, I'd rather do it myself because I know how I want it. It's the same thing, isn't it? It's the same thing.
It is the same thing, really.
Dave, can I ask a question about the production as well and just the writing process? I just want to know, do you enjoy that whole part of it, when you're actually creating the tune and getting in a bubble with recording and everything? Because I feel for me that's a whole part of the fun part of making music and making the songs. Well, when you're into the production and you're messing around and you kind of go deep down the rabbit hole of trying to create that picture of what you have in your head. It's a really a lot of musicians really don't like the whole production side, but I find it is another part of the creative outlet of trying to go deep into your creativity. So I kind of get that sense from you a little bit as well, but I'm just wondering if that's how you feel.
No, that's absolutely right. To me, the song. Okay, a song has to stand up on its own with just a guitar and voice. No matter what you do to it on a recorded album and how much production you put in, if the song cannot be played with just a guitar and voice. It's not a song. It's you can't rest the quality of the song on all the bells and whistles. It's got to be a good song to begin with. But the song is like a really good sketch, and then to me the recording is the painting of the song. Is the colouring of the song. Is this going to be a black and white song? Is it going to be full colour? Is it going to have an area of shock of an area that doesn't quite fit in? That sort of, why is that going to be there? And so to me, recording it is very much like the painting part. And so I get quite stressed when I start to write a song and I'm faced with a blank page. That is like, the first opening line is always the hardest one for me to get. And so I will sit with a guitar and literally play chords and sing rubbish over the top of it. I will noodle and sing.
Or just trying to find the melody.
Until
trying to find the vocal melody.
Trying to find melody, and it's kind of like, Stephen King says to the writer Stephen King. He says, I've got a muse, and what I say to my muse is, I'm going to be sitting at my computer at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, and if you're not there, I'm going to write rubbish until you turn up. And I think those moments of just playing and noodling on the guitar is just waiting for the muse to just turn up, waiting for the awen to start to flow, and then you'll just hear a kind of hook and go, that's it. And you'll just work on that, and then often that melody will tell you what the song is about, and then I have to let that settle for a while and just go, okay, so what do I want to say with this song? What do I want to express with these words? And I will let that brew in the cauldron for a little while, maybe. Sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it's really quick, but often I will let it brew in a little while. And then of course
Sorry, continue.
No, and then you've got finally you've got the song, and then of course the song has got to be recorded on a multi-track Logic audio Mac, doing all these things, and to me that's when you really can get very creative. But again, when I've got the scratch vocal that I put down first, and then the guitar, which is all I will have when I've written the song. That's like the blank page that I'm faced with, and I think, okay, so what would sound nice? Okay, and then I would pop in a bit of mandolin. And Kerry calls it bucket recording because I will throw everything at it, and then I'll start taking things away.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I know. Yeah,
I understand. I'm quite like that as well.
For sure.
Yeah. And then finally you're left with the final thing.
I think it's interesting, though, isn't it? I think one of the criticisms of like modern pop music a lot is like like things like auto tune and overproduction, and there's a massive criticism not just of pop. I don't want to pick on that genre, but of just that idea that you cannot play live what you're playing on the album. It's quite like frowned upon, isn't it, in the music industry? So it's very important that you can do that you can play like a live gig, and that your listeners aren't going, well, this isn't how it sounds on the album. So you're rubbish. Because that's almost like that's the last thing you want as a musician, isn't it?
Yeah, and when it's just me and a stomp box live, having to pull off a song like The Cauldron Born, which is very produced. I didn't play that live for years afterwards.
Really? You're just a bit intimidated by it.
I didn't think I could do it. I thought it's too big a song to play live. It was all right when I was sitting here playing it and writing it, but I didn't think I could, and I was at a witch fest camp, playing in a scout hut, and they started chanting Cauldron Born, and I just said that, and I said, look, it's too big, and they just said play it anyway. So I went over, I shut and locked the door of the scout hut, and I said, right, nobody films this. This is for you only in this moment. If it's rubbish, don't tell your friends. And I played it, and it's been in my set.
That was your breakthrough moment. Well, I could say, as you know, it was pretty clear from us, but we enjoyed it massively. As I said, we were like headbanging to it. Like, we might as well have been at like Download or Hellfest stock or something. As far as we were concerned, we were absolutely loving it. Bullwinkle, did you want to ask a question, man?
Yes, I was just going to ask whether you have a favourite album or even song to date that you've curated.
I mean, it's the standard answer is, they're all my babies, and to have a favourite baby is very difficult. I think there are songs that I still play and still get very excited about all the time and every time I play it. Whereas others that I've played them so many times that I've had to leave them out of the set for a while to bring them back in again and have a break. And I guess Green and Grey is probably the song that has Green and Grey and the Cauldron Born. But they're the ones that have, to me, I still play those opening notes of Green and Grey, and I still feel the reason I wrote that song.
Yeah, again, that's
time I play
that's another track that's off the Cauldron Born as well, isn't it?
Yes,
lovely song.
It was a funny.
I love
funny old album.
I love the story of that song as well. The idea of sort of like a monk walking into the forest and seeing like Pan or something, and thinking, oh my god, it's the devil, it's Satan, and being like terrified, and then almost like Pan explaining to it. Is it supposed to be Pan? I'm just trying to remember off the top of my head. Or is it supposed to be
the horned god,
like Hern or Canonos?
I call it the piper. So I guess I'd had a Pan figure in my head when I wrote that song, because the piper laid his goddess. Yeah,
that's how I sort of saw it, because obviously that traditional, almost like how you see Pan. It looks almost like a Christian. How in the Bible they describe Satan with like the little horns and the goat's legs and stuff like that. And almost like quote unquote Pan, almost like describing to the monk like, no, I'm not Satan. I'm part of this earth, and I've been here for much longer than the Bible has, and stuff like that. It's a great song. Yeah. Great song.
Yeah. I loved writing that song, and like I say, even now I can tell it's another song that speaks directly to so many people. It kind of puts the record straight, but in not a horrible way. It's not a rant. Yeah. It's a gentle reminder.
Well, I think it's a great way of explaining to everyone, all of us. People, anybody that's sort of maybe ostracized or has grown up in, let's face it, we're seen traditionally as a Christian sort of nation and stuff, and we all grew up in Christian schools singing Christian rhymes, and it was very sort of a normal thing to go to church and stuff like that. And for any of us that felt maybe at all ostracized from it, or just didn't feel like that was really them, it's actually almost like a very good way of explaining why we don't feel like that's for us. Maybe any frustrations with reading the Bible, and maybe it's a bit preachy, and maybe people that would look down on you maybe for saying that you're not an atheist, or for saying that you are a pagan, or for saying that you're whatever. It's a good way of explaining, why you don't feel in tune with that sort of Christianity or whatever.
Yeah. So I think that's probably your answer. I'd say Green and Grey is, I wouldn't say it was my favourite song, but it's the one that I never ever get tired of playing live. Yeah.
You've got so many great tracks, Damh. I think that you are a very consistent musician. In my opinion, you haven't really got like a weak album, so to speak, and at least on all of your albums you've got some great songs. I love songs like Grimm's Pound. I think it's such a good song. I love Grimm's Pound. By nature I usually like the more, I don't know, I guess maybe a bit more like thoughtful, maybe minor, a little bit more melancholic songs, but all of your songs like that. I love your really a bit more like, almost like your, I don't know how to describe it, maybe a bit more like sweeter songs like the Celtic I love as well, but it's a beautiful song. But yeah, I love songs like Grimm's Pound and stuff, and I'm just trying to think, there's a cover you do of an older folk song.
Raggle Taggle Gypsy is awesome.
Yeah, that's great. It's not the one I was thinking of. What's the one I'm thinking of? It's When I Was Walking All Alone.
Oh yeah, Twacolbies.
Yes, Twacolbies. Yeah, I love your rendition of that as well. And I was really happy as well, because actually the last time I saw you live, you played that in Glastonbury. So I was very happy about that.
Yes. That was from the Crowman album, a whole album full of traditional folk songs, and I played that actually over in Prague, and that song even has because I thought you're not going to know this song, it's a Scottish song, and there's a version of Twacolbies in
really?
Bohemia in Prague as well.
Wow.
It's and that's the thing about these folk songs, is you think because Francis Child or these folk collectors collected this one song, you think that's where it's from. Yeah. But that's just the one they collected. Yeah. There's these songs are everywhere.
I find that really fascinating. Yeah. We had an artist, a guest on last week called Angela Autumn, and she's a really like rising star from Nashville, Tennessee. Great artist. And obviously, I find American folk very interesting sort of genre, because obviously it evolved out of European folk music. And obviously became naturally, because of their surroundings and their lifestyle, that whole almost old Wild West thing, almost like it became very Americanized, but you can still see the roots in the European folk, and it was really interesting actually. I think it was the artist Doc Watson. I'm not sure if you're familiar. He was sort of like an old sort of country and folk star in the 60s and 70s in America. Might have even been 50s and 60s. But I was listening to one of his songs, and it was the same melody. He was playing the same guitaring as Raggle Taggle Gypsies, but the vocals, the lyrics had just been changed to almost like represent what it was like living almost as like a cowboy in the Wild West. And it just goes what you were saying with how, you know, did you say you were in the Czech Republic, did you say? When you went with Twa Corbies?
Yes.
It's exactly the same thing. Yeah. You know, it's like these songs are resonating with everyone. They might tweak them a little bit and change them a little bit to suit you, almost like, you know, because it needs to be relevant to the listener, I guess. So they're like changing it. But absolutely like fascinating. Do you remember do you know who actually wrote Twa Corbies? I've never actually looked into it.
It's those classic people, Trad and Anon.
Trad and Anon. I've never heard that.
You know, traditional and anonymous.
That was a stupid moment by me there. That was a blonde moment by me, wasn't it? Yeah.
Lost to the history of time.
I was like, I've never heard of that Scottish band.
Well, they left those brothers left us so many great songs, you know, and we don't have. So Trad and Anon wrote Twa Corbies.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah, because I know that several like big folk artists have done covers of it, haven't they? Yeah, it's a beautiful song. I think Fairport have, haven't they, or Steel Eye Span or somebody.
Fairport, Steel Eye, you know, loads of them have done it. And when I was recording it, I realised that there's no refrain or hook or chorus, and so I created that ooh, that bit. I just wrote that to myself to put in as a bit of a refrain to put in there, to break up the story a little bit. And
I can genuinely say as well, it's one of my favourite bits of the song because it adds like a lot of almost atmosphere and ambience, I feel, to the track.
Because it's a ghost story, isn't it? It's a ghost story.
I think that's one of the things I love about it. It's quite morbid, isn't it? The idea that there's this almost like this dead night, you know, and nobody knows where he is, and you know his like lover is far away. And I love those old sort of melancholic tunes. It's very in tune with. It's almost like brutally honest, aren't they? You know, it's basically saying, you know, how doesn't it end up something like, you know, the night that died, who, like, you know, the raven's eating his eye and everything like that, and his partner's like moved on. She's found another night. Nobody knows where he is. He's just sort of like there rotting, but it's like. It's almost like the harsh realities of nature, like that was definitely some knight's fates back in the day, or people's can be your fate today even, you know? Yeah. I love that.
Over his bones where they lie bare, the wind shall blow forevermore. Oh. You know, and that's the final line of the song.
And it's
great.
Beautiful. But it's beautiful as well, isn't it? It's like so poetic. Like how poetic is that? Absolutely fantastic. Yeah. I was going to say, how well, because this is one thing I sort of struggle with a little bit, Damh, because I sort of find myself naturally resisting like technology a little bit. I just don't really like it. I don't really get on with it. Obviously, you naturally, you said, you know, you really naturally picked up production. You very much enjoy the process, but obviously to do that, you have to be heavily involved with sort of technology and spend hours and hours staring at a computer screen and things like that. Like, does that come easy to you? Does that just like not bother you at all? Have you always found that technology is like something that you're just into and you can pick up quite easily? Or?
Yeah, I have the attitude towards technology that I push buttons until it works.
Yeah, sure.
You know, and I'm not frightened of pushing buttons.
Yeah.
And if I don't know how to use it, you know, Google is your friend, and YouTube has usually got the answer. I've used Logic for every album, Logic Audio, and Logic back when I was working with Hearn's Apprentice was not a Mac owned product. It was on a PC. I recorded that album on a Dell.
Wow.
In a tiny little bedroom in my house.
Yeah, sure. What year was that as well, by the way, just for people to get an idea? That'd be
2002, something like that. Yeah, 2002. And I wouldn't say I had the best equipment either for that album. But really, I didn't do any bells and whistles on that. I literally, what you hear is how it was recorded. I didn't really EQ the tracks at all much. And I think when I listen to it now, there are elements of it that might be a bit too bassy for my ears,
really?
And stuff like that. But yeah, but hey,
it's interesting though, because and it just is a credit to you, obviously, as somebody that picked it up naturally. Because as I said, I think that's actually my favourite album. And while I'm not the sort of person that looks into these things loads, and also, like, you know, I'm the sort of guy, like, a lot of my favourite albums are live albums because I prefer sort of that idea of capturing magic over technical, you know, being pristine, you know, that sort of pristine sound. But even so, you know, I think, you know, there are definitely times where I could listen to an album, for example, and think, oh, that sounds like a little bit off, or that this is way higher in the mix than that, maybe to the point where it sounds a bit strange. But I've never thought that with Hearn's Apprentice. I don't know, just because maybe just because so much of it was recorded live, or you did it in such a natural way. I don't know, but you didn't overcomplicate things, I guess. But I think it's a great album.
It was very, very stripped back, that album, and I, like I say, I was just coming out of Spiral Castle, which literally had 5 mates in it, and so I used 5 tracks and a couple of tracks for backing vocals, and that was it really. I doubled the guitar, for instance, on Blood Iwith, so I could split that to either channel and played the same thing but twice.
Right, yeah.
I just love pushing buttons until the things work, sure. and I'm not frightened of technology.
So you don't mind sitting in front of a computer screen all day if that's what you need to do.
Yeah, I mean, on the whole, I guess because I've been using Logic since 2002, Logic has changed over the years and more things have been added, but if I wanted to, I could play exactly the same. And I do really just still play the same. I just record the tracks to a click tracks, and I have to because it's me, I have to have a click track that keeps me in time when I'm playing these instruments and stuff. And it's only once everything's down that I start to look at EQing instruments and mixing and stuff like that. And that took a while to get used to, if I'm honest. I would, for a few albums, I would listen to the songs and I would think, this sounds rubbish. And of course it sounds rubbish because this is essentially not even a demo right now. You're still adding stuff.
And also, you're always harshest to yourself as well, aren't you? I'm sure other people wouldn't have thought that, but yeah.
And then suddenly you mix it and you pan it and you and suddenly you go, oh no, it's not rubbish. This is all right. Thank the gods I didn't scrap this and go back to the drawing board. So yeah.
When you record your tracks, do you record the vocals and the guitar at the same time, or do you record the guitaring first and then the vocals afterwards? I'm just interested.
It's always the main rhythm instrument first,
right.
So it would be the guitar or the mandolin or the bouzouki first, and then I will put down a scratch vocal. Just I will sing very, very casually, just so that I know where I am in the song. Okay. And then what I do now, and I didn't before, but I will go into Logic and I will, along the top, you can put different coloured areas of where the first one is, verse, chorus, so that you can get back and forward around the song quicker. If you wanted to put a little kind of twiddly bit of guitar in the verse, you could go straight to verse and do that and stuff, and then so the ornamentation happens at the end. Okay. And that's when I throw the bucket at it and then gradually take things away.
Sure.
Yeah.
So we've spoken about, obviously, you becoming a druid. It's nice, actually. You might be interested. One really nice thing that my dad inherited from his grandparents was my great grandmother Olive. Her maiden name was Buck, and she lived in a little village. She was from a little village called Cannington in Somerset. And one of the things that sits next to my dad's armchair in his living room nowadays is he was in the Order of the Druids. And I don't know if you had one when you joined, but there's this lovely, great big framed picture we have, very quite a big picture, and it says John Buck hereby John Buck joined the Order of the Druids, and it's this beautiful picture, and there's 2 sort of figures on each side, one a bit of like an older man with a big beard, and one a younger man, and then there's 2 trees each side, and there's like an eye in the tree. In one of the trees, I think there's something else in the other tree as well. I can't remember off the top of my head. But did you get like something like that when you joined? The thing is, this is back from like the 40s or 50s. This picture, so it would have been many years before you would have become.
So that would have been either the ancient Order of Druids.
Yes,
probably.
I think it is. Yeah.
And they were all over the world. They were a little bit like the Masons.
Okay.
They were a friendly, fraternal druid order, and these I played in when I played in Adelaide last time. I played at one of their centres that was there from the kind of early 1900s. The United Ancient Order of Druids and stuff. So they were worldwide. My druid order came from that druid order in the 60s. There was a bit of a split, and over who should become the next chief of the order.
Okay.
And some people didn't agree, and so Ross Nichols and some of the other members broke off. and formed the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids in 1964.
Very interesting.
So our order sort of comes from that kind of tradition.
Your cousins.
But
cousins.
Yeah, we are. You know, we're definitely all related, and but no, when I joined the order, I didn't get anything like that. But when you finish the Druid grade, you might get something.
Right. How did you?
Similar,
obviously, you talked about you becoming a Druid, and you go into these events, and you start thinking, I'm getting a little bit bored of the same songs all the time, so I'm going to start writing this, and that's obviously what made you sort of get to the place you are today. Obviously, there's a big gap between that though and actually becoming the Pendragon of the Order of Bards and Druids. So how did that come about?
So I now live in Brighton, down on the south coast, and the OBOD's head office is in Lewes, which is 20 minutes from my house. And the chosen chief of the order and the scribe of the order had a Druid grove at their house. So I for many years I went over there for the 8 seasonal festivals. I got to know Philip and Stephanie very well, and then they wanted to go and live in New Zealand for a while, essentially. And they just said, while we're gone, would you run the office? And at the time I had my own business, but it was not in an industry that I was interested in being anymore. So I had a very quick and not so difficult conversation with my then business partner and said, I want out. And we got that sorted. And
Do you mind me
Philip
asking
and
what you were doing? What was that?
No, what I was doing, I from school, I left school at 16 and I joined a company called Cooper Pegler who made crop sprayers.
Okay.
And I joined on the factory line, worked my way through into the offices, into research and development. I became an overseas trainer, went to Africa to train people in the safe use of all this stuff. But at the same time, my love of Druidry and the land and of nature was growing, and I found myself regularly at the premises of ICI and Monsanto and all these big chemical companies who are spraying pesticides all over the crops. And I found that I got to the point, a bit like, with my vegetarian stuff, I just got to the point where I couldn't square the industry that I was in with the ethics and
an ethical decision.
viewpoint of my Druid path. And so I knew I had to get out. I couldn't stay within that industry. And so I got out. And luckily I got the opportunity to get out. And so Philip and Steph moved to New Zealand. And I ran the office for while they were there and sent out all of the GWERS and the teachings and the documents and the courses and answered the phones and email was coming in at that time as well. So I got to know Philip and Steph really well. I also started to put on some of the events for the order. I just got right into it. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't just the Druidry for me, it was the community for me. And I could see that the community was just as much part of the personal path as well. Coming together, developing, spaces where members from all over the world could meet up. Yeah. It's that cauldron born thing. Sure. It's knowing there are other people like you. And so I got right into that. And then in 2010, the then Pendragon, who was Will Worthington, he's an artist. He did the Druid Animal Oracle, the Druid Plant Oracle, the Druid Craft Tarot.
My missus probably has some of them, to be honest.
Yeah, well, he's a fantastic artist, and he was Philip's Pendragon and had been for 19 years. Ross Nichols, the person who founded the order back in the 60s, his Pendragon was a woman called Vera Chapman, and she founded the Tolkien Society.
Oh, brilliant! I'm a massive Tolkien fan.
And was a writer.
Massive Tolkien fan.
Yeah, and so she was a writer. So Nguyen had a writer. Philip then had an artist, and then Will kind of just said, "I think I've had enough, and I need to hand it on." And Philip and Steph asked me to become the new Pendragon in 2010. And at the time, I didn't really know what that involved. I just knew that I was very much into the idea of becoming the sword holder for the order. And so I was initiated in Glastonbury in June 2010 as the Pendragon.
Is it always in Glastonbury? I mean, I suppose it's only happened a few times, but
it's really happened only a few times. So it's weirdly enough, it does tend to happen a lot in Glastonbury, but that's. I don't know why that is. Apart from it's a very special place.
Old Avalon,
Yeah, and it took me probably about 6 months to get to terms with what that was, and I realised that there are three roles within the order. There is the chosen chief, there's the scribe, and then there's the Pendragon, and that was me, Philip, and Stephanie. And what it became obvious at that time is that the chosen chief is like the buck stops here. It's like who will make the final decision. Somebody has to make the final decision. Even in a democracy, someone has to say, right, we're going to do this, and make that decision, and then stand by it or not. That was Philip. Stephanie was working in the office. She was the one organising the mailing outs of all of the teaching materials and stuff like that. She was like the engine room or the drummer of the band. She was the one keeping everything in time, and she had the scribe, and that made sense. And then I realised that the Pendragon for me, with what I was doing as a musician, it was almost like ambassador, I guess you'd call it, because with my music I've got one foot definitely in Druidry, but I've definitely, if I had a lot of feet, I'd have another foot in Wicca.
Yeah, sure.
I'd have another foot in the northern traditions. I'd have another foot in shaman traditions, and I knew and was known by so many people in so many different traditions that I could be an ambassador for the order within
almost like make
that kind of relationship.
Making connections
It's like
you said
like
that you were like into Wicca before.
The magic stuff. Yeah. And I think so you've got a writer, an artist, and a musician. So it seems to me that the Pendragon role is about communication.
It's quite beautiful,
yeah. It's about communication, and that kind of thing. Hence the fact I'm here with you, I guess.
Yeah, fantastic. You were saying obviously about you wanting to make those connections. If you would have like a foot in shamanism and a foot in sort of like the Norse paganism as well. Do you chat to many people that are involved in both of those worlds and stuff like that? And what's your relationship with, as a druid? What's your relationship with those sort of groups, if you do?
It's a relationship for me personally that's developed really well and quite in unexpected directions over the last 3 years. I've always loved the Norse myths, but the Celtic myths and Norse myths aren't kind of obvious bedfellows, particularly when you look at the kind of the Dark Age story that I was always told, that my ancestors as an Anglo-Saxon English person were invaders and all that kind of, who pushed the Celts to the very edges of the world and all this kind of thing, hanging on by neat fingernails and stuff. And I thought I really want to find out if that's true. And of course it's not necessarily like I've been told. The truth is far more nuanced and far more complicated and complex a history than just that. And so to me that opened up the doors for me to explore my Anglo-Saxon Norse relationships.
Can you explain why it's much more complicated and why it's more nuanced? Because obviously from a historical standpoint, just to give sort of people context that people aren't so into their history. So obviously the Anglo-Saxons invaded sort of when the Romans were sort of pulling out of Britain. What you sort of had left was a bit of like a void in Britain, I guess, at the time, because all the Roman soldiers and stuff had pulled out. This is when you start seeing the Anglo-Saxons coming over. And for people that aren't aware, the Anglo-Saxons essentially believed the same religions and mythologies as the Scandinavians, didn't they? So they just called it a slightly different name. So they would call it Woden, whereas in like Sweden, Norway, it would have been Odin. But it was the same. They had the same. They had the same pantheon of gods and goddesses, didn't they, and stuff like that. So as you were sort of alluding to, the idea is that the Anglo-Saxons came in, they filled that void that the Romans had left, and that there were like the Cornish, the Welsh, the Scottish, the Irish, and the Manx people who were like the true Brits that were sort of on the edge. So what you're saying obviously is a lot more nuance than that, and that's not necessarily the case of it just being as clear cut as invaders and the original people. So can you explain that a little bit?
Okay, so the idea that the Romans were here, the Romans we know did not fill Britain with loads of Romans. They had a whole series of forts along the southeast coast they called the Saxon Shore. For a lot of people that means that they were built to keep the Saxons out. But there's archaeological evidence that actually it was mercenaries brought in by the Romans, and they were actually the Saxons were already here when the Romans were here. You have when Caesar arrived before Rome, before Claudius did his successful venture. Caesar came over here, and in his writings he says he found an island with 3 languages.
Oh, right.
He said he found an island with Brythonic language, Gaelic language, and a Germanic language. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that the Regnicii of what became Sussex, the Atrebates, the Belgae, even maybe the Iceni of what would become East Anglia, that these were already people who could speak 2 languages. Wow. Because the trade was across the English Channel. That was where the trade was. So the people on the south coast were already speaking a Germanic language before the Romans even arrived. Yeah. And then you have the archaeological record. When you look at the archaeological record, there's very little. Well, there are skirmishes, yes, but not the idea of a huge invading army that created, with vast battles. Certainly not just after the Romans left in about the 450 CE. What you do see is integration. What you do see is immigration, not invasion. You see immigration. You see people coming over from the mainland Europe, maybe because of the development of the Frankish Empire, and they were running away from that or whatever. But you see also interrelationships. You start to see graves of Britons that have grave goods of Anglo-Saxon art, and you start to see skeletons of males and females being buried together that are both from Germanic and Briton people. And it seems to me, looking at a lot of the evidence, that between 450 and 650 there was a lot of immigration but not invasion. And it was only in the 650s where big men with swords started to appear, and say to people, "Oh, I'm your king, I'm your chieftain." "No, you're not." "Oh, you're dead." "No, I really am your chieftain." And you start to see the bullies arrive, like Sissa and Aiella, and all these people that we know the names of as that of Anglo-Saxon chieftains. And then you see the development of Mercia and of Northumbria, Wessex, and those chieftains and Sussex, Kent, and Wessex and stuff like that. Yeah, and I think that it was only really after the 650s that you start to see proper, real violence happening.
Yeah. Do you think that was a direct result of the Romans all pulling out, as we know?
No, I think that when you look at what was happening in the 650s, you realise that there's a lot of argument about different types of Christianity, and this is really weird to sort of take on board. But arguments about when to place Easter was a real thing that led to proper battles. You
can see why, really, in a historical context. Yeah. It's because this was real to them, and and so you had a certain amount of people who were still holding on to the Catholicism view of the world, and you had others that were holding on to a more Celtic Christianity. And those two were clashing a lot. As we all know,
and I think
a lot of what we consider like nowadays like Christian holidays have their basis, like in paganism. Like Christmas, winter solstice, Easter. As they're called in paganism, like Easter, and like the bunnies and all of that stuff. All the kids, like Christian children, eat chocolate bunnies, but the bunnies is a pagan thing. Obviously, there was nothing at like Jesus' resurrection, like little bunnies were running around.
Yeah, exactly.
So that makes sense why there would have been arguments about things like this. But please continue, because this is really fascinating.
Yeah, no. So it just looks, when you look at when you kind of like say, okay, if it wasn't invasion, if it was immigration, that there's a certain level of people who take up different cultures. I mean, look at us with America. The amount of American culture that is in British or English. If somebody came, if we all died out and somebody came and they saw all of the McDonald's and everything, they would think, oh, this country was taken over by Americans.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, it's an interesting point.
And I think culture is one thing that you can take on board without necessarily any kind of violent clashes. And I just got the feeling the more and more I read, and I read a lot over the last 3 years to try and level this up with myself, is that that a lot of those battles that did happen were more about religion than about land, and just the land and the kingdoms of the Anglo-Saxons that we know, they kind of developed rather than were imposed, And,
I find it quite interesting. So it's interesting though, isn't it? Because the main difference between the Anglo-Saxons and, say, when the Vikings started invading, obviously famously at first at Lindisfarne, as I said, like the Anglo-Saxons originally would have been almost like the same essentially as the Scandinavians. Yeah. The big difference by the time they invaded was obviously religion. So the Vikings were still pagan. The Anglo-Saxons by this point were very much Christian. And I guess really, I mean, I don't want to say to blame necessarily, but I guess the Roman influence is the thing that made the Anglo-Saxons, obviously to convert to Christianity. Obviously, there were massive ties all the way to Rome, wasn't it? People would go on pilgrimages all the way to Rome. Yep. And it had pros and cons. Obviously, there was trade. It opened up trade massively because obviously there were trade routes through about like probably 2/3 of the world through Rome. So you could find stuff in Britain, maybe from Asia, even but in 800 AD, or something like that. So obviously in that respect, it was a positive. But on the downside, as you're saying, they had such a die-hard Christian influence that it was almost, in those days, it was almost like anybody that wasn't a Christian would have been put to the sword. I mean, you see, obviously, what massive downsides for certain members of the population at the time. If you were, say, like a Christian woman, you would have had it was quite a sexist religion. Men would have been able to do things that women couldn't do, and obviously, as is still seen a little bit today, a little bit like in your song Green and Grey, if you weren't a Christian, you would have been considered like heathen scum, I guess.
Or even if you were the wrong type of Christian. I think that's the thing that you got there. The Anglo-Saxons, we know that King Alfred went on pilgrimage to Rome, and and it was a really big thing. Then on the other side, you had the monastic type of Christianity, which was developing in Northumbria and things like that, with Aidan and with Columcille and stuff. And I think that they viewed each other. I mean, look, that went on for years.
Do you know the differences between that? Because I don't know so much about monastic Christianity.
Yeah, I mean, basically, Catholicism is the same, is very similar to as it always has been, bells and smells and ritual and speaking in Latin and all those things, but the Celtic Christianity that would have been held by a lot of the Britons, certainly influenced by Ireland and stuff like that, that's more like there was a thing called the Pelagian heresy, which was basically this monk called Pelagius who denied the existence of original sin. That's the big one, that you were not born sinful, that you were born beautiful, you were born one of God's creation, and you were not born into a place of torture and torment. You were born into God's creation, and God's creation is beautiful and wonderful, and nature is wonderful, and it's very There's word said that the ancient Druids adopted Christianity, and I think that it was the Celtic Christianity that they could understand, because it was very much a nature-based Christianity. It didn't seek to escape the world, and it didn't seek to escape or to atone for sins that you're born with, and that's the difference.
So it's essentially half glass full versus half glass empty.
Well, it's but these things were very important to these people. These weren't superstitions; they were absolute reality. So a lot. I just think a lot of those battles that we read about in Welsh myth. And Welsh poetry, like the Taliesin poems and the Gododin and all these places, I think a lot of the roots of that is not land, but just an absolute misunderstanding and a clash of culture, rather than of anything else.
That's absolutely fascinating. I think probably another thing, which is probably an easy way for people to think about it, is you go to a lot of places like Glastonbury nowadays, and also if you just go to places like Scotland or Ireland or the Isle of Man or Wales and stuff, you see obviously like a Celtic cross, and people will often think like, what's the difference between a Celtic cross and a regular cross? And I guess that's what you've just sort of explained. It's like, I guess the Celtic cross is a monastic cross, maybe more. That's a little bit more came out of that. Did you say Pelagius? Did you say? Pelagius, yeah.
So you look at the Celtic cross. If you look, a lot of them, what they've got is the cross, but they've got a circle in it, and the circle is that thing that we say is the seasons, is the circle of life, and the sun and moon, and so you've got that mysticism.
It's mixed almost with the Druidic paganism.
Yes, yeah, that's what it feels like.
Fantastic, so interesting.
There you go. Didn't expect to go down that rabbit hole in this
amazing.
conversation.
I was absolutely loving that. I thought that was really, really fascinating stuff. I was going to say sort of like touch going back a little bit more just to the pure music stuff, like guitars. Obviously, I think it's like really interesting as a guitarist to ever talk to another guitarist about guitars. How much of a guitar nerd are you? Like, how much do you look into like the guitars you buy? Are you like one of those people? Are you like quite anal? You're like, I'm only going to play a guitar like that, or you're not really bothered, or?
Oh no, I think my attitude to instruments changed when I bought my Celtic harp. Or I bought the sister of the one I played in that field from the same harp maker. They're all made by hand up in Scotland, Starfish Designs, and I bought the same model, and it all took 6 months to build. Arrived, and I was told of this tradition that when you get it, you just literally tune the harp up. And just literally run your hands over the instrument and just ask the instrument to give you its name. And that name is between you and the harp. You're the only person who will know that. You have a secret name, and then you have a public name that you will tell other people that the harp is named.
Wow,
I love that.
Beautiful. And so beautiful.
Yeah. And then I was at a harp festival once, and I met this harper who saw me, and he knew I was a druid, and he came up to me and he said, I want to give you a verse, and the verse is to invoke the spirit of the harp, and it's a verse that a harper only gives another harper once in their life, and I want to give it to you. And so he told me this verse that you speak as you play the harp to awaken the spirit of the harp before you perform, and so he told it to me, and then I pass it on to one harper after it goes on. I don't know how old that is. I don't really care.
Sure.
It was beautiful.
Yeah, it is beautiful.
Wow.
Yeah. And so what I did, the moment I did that, I started having the same thing with my guitars. I would go to a guitar shop, tune up the guitar that I would looking to buy, and I would play it in exactly the same way as I played that harp when it first arrived, looking for the spirit of the guitar, and asking that spirit of the guitar if we can be friends, if we're going to have a conversation and things like that. And sometimes you get a distinct, there's nothing here. You might look at the most fantastic Gibson and go, it's a really expensive Gibson guitar. You pick it off and you play it, and it sounds beautiful, but then there's nothing there. Yeah. There's nothing there. And I was doing that, and I picked up my first Taylor. I've still got her here, and I started to play this Taylor, and I tuned it to Dadgad, D-A-D-G-A-D, and I started playing it in the music shop, and I just strummed it and started playing it, and everybody in this acoustic room stopped looking at their guitars and just looked over at me, and somebody said, "Yeah, that's yours," And I knew it was this was the instrument, and so yeah.
I think
I love all guitars, but there are only some that were just
yeah. It's interesting because I think if guitarists were being sort of open-minded enough and honest enough, I think that everyone could have examples of that. I've been in guitar shops before, and been talking to the owner of the shop, and they've said like, oh, this is probably the best one we've got in, so like try that, and then I've been playing guitars which are £200 cheaper. Not quite so much of a fancy brand, and for whatever reason it just feels right in your hand, or whatever reason you're like, no, this is the best one, because I think you're sort of tempted to go, oh well, if I'm going to get the one that's best on paper, rather than exactly. I remember like one of my favorite guitars I've got in terms of the sentimental value. I've got this like £100 Ibanez acoustic. Obviously Ibanez, known, you think of Ibanez, you think of more like Steve Vai or something, not of like an acoustic guitar, don't you? I bought this £100 acoustic guitar back when I started getting I guess back into sort of guitaring after a few years of not playing when I was younger. So I just wanted something just to sort of bash at, really, not necessarily play, like gigs with or anything like that. So I just bought a £100 Ibanez guitar. I hadn't even played it, and it just was sort of like by a miracle that it was great, and I fell in love with it. And like Drew, for example, Drew's got like Maton guitar, like a Maton acoustic guitar, and really, top
Lovely.
quality guitar. And I remember Drew playing that before, and he said, in some ways, that's like better than my Maton. And it's like £100 Ibanez guitar. I've got it right here actually.
Yeah.
Mahogany, beautiful wood.
Oh, look at that.
But on paper, it's nothing special about it at all. It's probably not even considered average. I said it was £100, and that was probably in like 2013 or something, for reference. But it's just a great guitar.
Yeah.
Great guitar.
Yeah.
In terms of music, Damh, are you writing at all at the moment, or?
Very much, yeah. I've got 8 songs written for a new album.
Fantastic.
Two left, maybe 4. Depending on whether or not it's a 10 or a 12 track album. We'll see how it goes. So yeah, I'm coming towards the end of that, and I've also written the story and spoken word section of the 4th branch of the Mabinogi as well.
Fantastic.
So there's plenty of new stuff coming in 2024.
Just for listeners that aren't familiar, can you explain that? I've obviously follow you, but can you explain that the branch of the Mabinogi, like what that's all about?
Yeah. So basically, the Mabinogi or the Mabinogion are the oldest stories from Wales, and they tell the story of the Mabon. Pryderi or Llywelyn, and they're the stories of all of the gods and goddesses that anyone in Wicca or Druidry and paganism who are interested in Welsh mythology, they would have heard all of these names: Rhiannon, Gwydion, Blodeuedd, Bran. These are their tales, and it's just amazing to me that they aren't more widely known. I mean, I know they're Welsh stories, but they are stories of Britain.
Of course, yeah.
They're stories of the island of Britain. And I think I think they should be more widely known outside of Wales because they're relevant to the whole island.
Well, in the same way that everybody knows King Arthur, do you know what I mean? Like, it's the same thing, isn't it?
Yeah. And they were written down in the Victorian times. They were translated into English by Lady Charlotte Guest, but they were written down by monks in the 1300s, and they just are they're like timeless. They're like amazing Marvel comics. They're as exciting as they were when they were originally said. And there are 4 branches of the Mabinogi. I have already written and recorded the first 3 branches. And I have 1 left, and the 4th branch is like the biggie. It's going to be a triple album, I reckon. This one.
Oh, nice.
But it's the big one. It's the one most people know already.
Awesome, man.
Yeah.
So I think have you guys got any more questions? Anything you'd like to ask, Dan?
No, I found it really amazing. It's very, very, it's been amazing hearing your story and the way that you look at music and your instruments and everything. It's been really good. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. It's been lovely to have a chat. Thanks for inviting me on. Anytime if you want me to come back.
Absolutely love you to come back. Yeah, and I'll definitely play your new tracks when you bring out your new album. Have you got a name for your new album? I know you. No,
not yet.
Still waiting.
It hasn't told yet. I'm still waiting for the title of the album. Yeah. No, not yet.
Have you got anything that you would like to tell all the listeners out there, sort of like a message or just anything you'd like to say at all? Sort of before we depart?
I don't think so. I think maybe if you wanted to get up on the morning of the 21st of December and watch a sunrise. And the good thing about the winter solstice sunrise, it's later, so you haven't got to get up so early in the morning. Sure. So yeah, maybe I'd say if you want to start feeling some of this stuff, go up on a local hill and just watch the sunrise around the winter solstice, and that is the time that we as Druids would see the rebirth of the sun. The Mabon, the sun child, would be reborn at that time, and just take a few moments of silence and welcome back the light.
Fantastic. Well, thanks very much, Damh. So I look forward to listening to your new music. Really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show, and have a great winter solstice. And I look forward to speaking to you again. And I look forward to seeing you again live as well. I can't wait until the next time.
Yeah. I'll keep an eye out for you.
Thanks so much, Dan. Really appreciate your time.
Right.
Cheers, mate. Just so you know as well, we're going to play out some of your music now. For our listeners, going to play a couple of your tracks as well, just to play you out. Thanks so much.
Brilliant. Thank you.